I'm also a computer programmer. If ever you would run if ever you would have a printer on Linux, and it would be a Canon one in Europe, then the driver has been written by me. I've been doing this already for 25 years. Is there a pointer, or should I just hit it?
You need to just press
there?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah. I want to dedicate my talk to Jim Ryder, who was a very good friend of mine. For those of you who don't know him, he had a wide range of interests ranging from space technology to electric universe elements and to philosophy. He was heavily involved in the Sapphire project and many more, so he will be greatly missed. He died, as you know, months ago, totally unexpected. We've seen this image already, so I will go very fast over some of them because I don't want to repeat what others have said. But here, the title of my talk, by the way, is Electricity, Man and Cosmos. Here you see on the right, or the left for you, a brain cell, and on the right, an artist's interpretation of the universe far away. I won't say at the edge of the universe because we don't know what that is. But what is important is the similarity. I want to talk a little bit about ageless wisdom and science. We have already seen a bit of the ageless wisdom in the figure of Robert Flood from the Rosicrucian angle. I will take a slightly different angle, but it doesn't make too much of a difference. I want to talk a little bit about Wolfgang Pauli. You will see later why. Electricity, bioelectricity, and then in the end consciousness. When I talk about the ageless wisdom, for me that will be a bit like this. You can see there's a tree which started somewhere in the 19th century and then goes on. Some of the names you may recognize, others you will not recognize. That's not too important. I will just make some statements which may be surprising. Those people have written a lot of things. Much is not very comprehensible, it's difficult to understand, but some things are easy to understand. And one is this. There is no gravitation in the Newtonian sense, but only magnetic attraction and repulsion. And it is by their magnetism that the planets of the solar system have their motions regulated in their respective orbits by the still more powerful mechanism of the sun, not by their weight or gravitation. This was written in the 19th century by somebody who's called, well, HBB or H.B. Blavatsky. She was no scientist. Probably at her time she was enemy number one of the scientists because she was attacking them full head on. A second one, believing but in the law of mutual magneto-electric attraction and repulsion, we come to the conclusion that universal gravitation is a weak force, utterly incapable of accounting for even one small portion of the phenomena of motion. That's about the same time, and I have a third one of her. The Earth is a magnetic body. In fact, as some scientists have found, it is one vast magnet, as Paracelsus already affirmed years ago. It's charged with one form of electricity, let's call it positive, which evolves continuously by the spontaneous action in its interior or center of motion. She may be wrong about the sign of the charts, okay, too bad for her, but the idea was already there. We are talking about 1877. Well, this I'm not going to read out because you all know it, but it says basically the same thing. This is from the book of Dave Talbot and Wallace Thornhill, already more than a decade ago. And the last one from Bailey in this case, one of the imminent discoveries will be the integrating power of electricity as it produces the cohesion within all forms and sustains all form life during the cycle of manifested existence. This is basically saying that electricity is the basis of all we see around us. Wolfgang Pauli. Pauli was a theoretical physicist. He was working at the time when quantum mechanics came on the front. He was not very well known, at least not as well known as Einstein and Heisenberg or Bohr, who were taking more of the front lines. He got the Nobel Prize because the Pauli principle, for those of you who don't know, it states that you cannot have two fermions or two spin-half particles in the same state in an atom. He also predicted the neutrino. He was what they called at his time the whip of physics. He was a really tough, hard-boiled egg who could even say, when he had to review a paper of a co-worker, it isn't even false. I've seen that title in a book somewhere that comes from Pauli. So, but he also had another interest, and he was looking into the work of Kepler and Flood. Flood we have already seen. Kepler, it's about that time, the 16th century, the 17th century, that Kepler starts to look at parts but separated from the rest. For Flood it was impossible. Flood was always looking at the unity. Of course you have to look at parts to say something about it. But Kepler was starting to look at parts separated from the rest, and that trend has continued in science. Nowadays we have experts who know almost all about nothing, but nothing about the whole. And Flood was always stating that. Pauli has written a book on that, and he said, well, be careful, we have to use both. We have to use the unity, and we have to look in the detail. Pauli, so that was the polarization between science and mysticism or occultism. Well, we all know the so-called scientific revolution started about that time, and we are now in really deterministic science. Pauli also loved a bottle of wine, and even after having drunk a bottle of wine, he could even write a very good scientific paper. But in the end, it became a problem for him, and he looked for advice with Carl Jung, who lived at the same time. He tried to work together with Jung. I'm not sure whether he really, for his wine problem, whether he followed the advice of Jung, but they had a very good collaboration, and he has been several years in contact with Jung. What few of you know, because in university they will never talk about this, about Pauli. They will tell you the Pauli exclusion principle, maybe that he was a bit a hard-boiled egg, but that's all. However, after the death of Pauli, it became clear that the dreams which Jung is talking about in all of his analysis were the dreams of Pauli. Pauli was a very intuitive man who had a lot of typical dreams, and I could talk hours about it, but I won't, don't worry. So, what I just want to stress is, when you talk to somebody, you never know who you're talking to. In the physics labs, Pauli was a hard-boiled egg. There was another problem with Pauli, which for the experimentalists, they call it the Pauli effect. When he would come into a laboratory, always something of the equipment would go bust. So there were even people who didn't allow him into the laboratory. That's the other Pauli effect. But okay, just to tell you that this was a man with really two sides, and maybe there are many more people, even amongst us, who have different sides, which we don't really want to show. Science. What is science? It's mankind's meditation on the nature of the universe. It is knowledge, the study of the natural world, based on facts and learning through experiments and observation. I've had many discussions with Jim Ryder on these kind of topics, and some of these things will be inspired by his thoughts. We can divide science globally or generally in natural sciences, social sciences, and formal sciences. This is one of the favorite quotes of Jim's. Science is a human pursuit, at once deeply personal, often flawed, and frequently groundbreaking. I think if many scientists would take this approach, we would be much better off. This is a quote from William James, already old, but it's still true. First, a new theory is attacked and absurd, then it's admitted to be true but obvious and insignificant. Pauli could also say this. And then finally, seen to be so important that its adversaries claim that they themselves discovered it. This is what we call a paradigm shift, but it's the way things go.
Yeah.
Something which is not in our favor is that Thomas Kuhn, who has written a whole book about paradigm shifts, A new scientific truth does not triumph by convincing its opponents and making them see the light, but rather because its opponent eventually died and a new generation grows up that's familiar. This is, I think, Max Planck who said this. It's not in our favor because people are living longer, so our opponents will also live longer. But change is there. This is an old quote from Tesla. If you want to find the secret of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency and vibration. And I'll go a little bit into that. For physicists, light is what you see there. Don Scott can much more better explain it than me. But at the same time, do we really understand what light is? If we look at it in a wave, it is massless, it can be polarized. Theoretically, it can be affected by gravity. But if you look at it in particles, we can see it both as a particle and a wave, or neither of the two. This is one of the big problems of the way we are looking at physics. At the same time, we know that it works very well. Even though we don't understand what it really is, we know how to apply it. All our equipment, even this screen, etc., is working on the effects of electricity. We know the Maxwell equations, we know how to apply them. And the result is all this technology which we have. But really understanding what it is, we don't. The same with light. This was Jim who also said this, I think, a year ago at the EU conference. And he kept repeating it. All we know, well, of course, astronomy is all based on what we see in light. Light, you should stretch a little bit beyond what we see with the eye. It's all the infrared, ultraviolet, and all the other frequencies now, which, by the way, give us those awesome images of the universe. It reveals what is hidden, factually and metaphorically. Factually, that's materialism in matter and technology, but metaphorically, it is revealing what is hidden behind what you could call the outer garment of matter. Enlightenment, we get an achievement of clarity of our perception. You know, you can say shed some light on it. That's not really the waves you are shedding on it. That's another interpretation of what we mean by light. We interpret what we see in the light of what we believe. And once again, in this context, that quote about what science is. Electricity. Well, we know a lot of physical phenomena. We talk about electrons and protons, part of a single phenomenon which we call electromagnetism. Electricity is used for many of those kind. We have seen a similar slide like this, so I'll skip a little bit over is. The only thing I want to emphasize is we don't really know what electricity is. To my mind, we don't even know what charge is. We know what polarization is. We know there are positive and negative. But what charge really is, if anybody can tell me, I will be happy. So, but we know, once again, we know very well to work with it. The ageless wisdom, and is electricity the basis of everything? I think yes. In the ageless wisdom, it is certainly stated, the Eastern teachers say that in the mystery of electricity is hidden all knowledge. And when you have faith in that, we shall know all there is to be known. In the human body, there are all these things. If we focus to a human body, we see the elements which are classical medical science will look at the elements and the cells like chemical components, but more and more people are looking at them as electrical components. Muscles are like batteries and healing is voltage, that we have seen already at I think one of the Electric Universe conferences 1 or 2 years ago. What choreographs billions of cells to create so many intricate anatomical patterns? Historically, we were talking about the genes, that we now know that that's not going to work. So again, electricity comes around the edge, and below here you see a whole list of established universities which are starting to take this approach. At the right you see two companies, Quora Vita and Global Energy Medicine. In the next slide, or the one thereafter, I'll talk a little bit about that. It's a bit what we see in the electric universe approach. People are studying it, and the right people are simply doing it. They are applying what is getting out of this approach. Just one, sorry. This is the one which I like. You probably may have seen it, but I just want to emphasize this. When you see a human body, actually in 35 weeks, you are supposed to see another one, because he has been completely replaced. All the cells, you know, you can see the other cells are being replaced earlier, but still we see each time the same person. Well, it gets a little bit older, you get a bit more gray hair and things like that, but basically you are the same. So, and what is doing that? What is responsible for that? Well, again, here we have an electrical approach to the body. And there are two devices coming on the market. One is it's a stone ball which you can put into your iPhone or your smartphone and then program it a little bit. It's based on what they call pulsed electromagnetic field technology. I've tried to get my head around what's really going on, and then people say, yes, well, it's a combination, and I believe them. This is more a practical approach. It's based on what the Eastern people know already for centuries about the energetic lines in the body, so the acupuncture lines and things like that. And it is based on the modern technology which you see here, and then the pulsed electromagnetic field technology. So I do have one, so if you want, we can experiment with it. I must confess, I'm not very sensitive, so if I use it on I know it works, but I cannot feel the radiation. I'm not that sensitive. My brother, he is a medical doctor, and he is integrating he was supposed to be here, but he couldn't come, so sorry for that. He can feel it, because he can even feel with his hands. So it depends on your sensitivity. But okay, we can play with that if you want. There's another one which I just want to mention. It's a bit older. It's from an Australian company which is called Global Energy Medicine. And they call it the E-cell, which is based on the same technology, the same things like that. And this is a project. I will not compare it to Sapphire because it's different, but there are certain similarities in the sense that this is a huge project which this guy in Perth in Australia is setting up, where he wants to really understand what's going on. What's going on between the electric field of a human body and the devices we are using. And he wants to assemble neuroscientists, nanotechnicians. Well, you see all the different disciplines, which he wants to combine into one project to really find out what's going on. The name of the guy is Laurie Farrow, and if you Google him, you will probably find him. I've met him several times, and he is really on a very big project. It hasn't materialized yet, at least I didn't get the mail that it started. It is imminent that he will get this project off the ground, which will certainly enhance our understanding of the electrical human body. A couple of notes about consciousness. In the Ageless Wisdom, consciousness is the capacity innate in each. It's one way of describing consciousness because you can do it in different ways. The capacity innate in each individualized state of being for relationships with other states of being objective to itself. Consciousness is primal, that's basically the major part. For science, we have already seen it's an epiphenomenon of the brain, and form is primal. Many scientists you talk to will say that it is an epiphenomenon. It's basically based on that hierarchy. Well, I'm a physicist, so for me the basis would be physics, and for many of the scientists. And then you have chemistry, which is already a bit softer. Biology is a rather soft science. Psychology is totally soft. And then you have mind. I'm talking as a physicist. But consciousness would be somewhere over there. However, what we see nowadays, there is a shift, not in the mainstream, but in many research laboratories. We are looking at it like that. Consciousness is now at the bottom, and all the other sciences are emerging from that. This is from the book of Dean Radin, which is called Real Magic, which I can really recommend to you, which is talking about this. So, yes, science today, it is starting to say everything is consciousness. You can see here philosophers are saying it, Thomas Nagel, David Chalmers. Biologists are saying it. If it is too small, Darwinian theory must explain complex intelligence creatures' emergence, which it doesn't. Physicist, Lee Smolin, I've already seen him in another slide. David Bohm, consciousness is intrinsic, telepathic communication is the norm. Those are statements of real physicists, not the mainstream, but there are really physicists who are starting to say it, and we see nowadays, it's about 5-10 years, that there are really scientific researches being done to conscious evolution, near-death experiences, life after death, reincarnation, you name it. We see the brain more as a receiver, so there must be something primary, which would be the soul. Scientific science is also studying consciousness and the existence of the soul. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vince. What we're going to do now is shed a bit of light on things and open the floor up for discussion. Don't particularly draw the curtains, but if you just want to part them so it becomes a bit more human. So anybody who wants to start off by asking me some questions? Anybody got any ideas? Vince, do you want to keep on talking and maybe it'll stimulate some people to respond? Yes, Jeremy? Yeah. There's more chairs down here, people. You don't have to be so far away.
Okay, that's it.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Excuse me, but I'd like to just make a couple of comments, if you would permit me.
Sure.
It goes back, I suppose, to the talk that Professor Robert, I've forgotten his surname now, Temple gave in Bath. And he actually referred to a dynamo mechanism operating in the sun. Now, whether you agree with it or not, he referred to it in his sort of conventional wisdom. The biggest problem with that model is, of course, that Cowling proved in 1934 an anti-dynamo theorem, and everybody's forgotten about it. Now, what's the link up with what you were saying earlier?
Yes.
The link up is that the anti-dynamo theorem depends crucially on what we all regard as Maxwell's electromagnetic equations. And I think it's about time it was made more public that, of course, his electromagnetic equations are to do with something moving in a stationary medium, not in a moving medium. They are, of course, like, or appear to be like, all other hydrodynamical equations. And it's some years ago now that the Englishman, Charles Thornhill, pointed this out, and pointed out that what you really need is a set of Maxwell's equations where, for the mathematically inclined in the audience, instead of having partial derivatives with respect to t, you actually have the total derivative. And this brings those equations into line with all the other equations of non-quantum physics. Now, Thornhill was ignored, as he's been ignored over just about everything else he's said. But if you go back, you've got a book on electricity and magnetism by Abraham and Becker, and in their book they go a long way towards deriving the Maxwell equations for a moving medium. But they stop with a long, complicated equation, followed by the equation, see my book on the electrons. Now, you can actually take Abraham and Becker's discussion, and you can take it through to its logical conclusion. How? By some mathematics? No. You take it through to its logical conclusion by bringing in some actual physical facts. And you come up with the equations that Thornhill had been advocating for years. And I just wanted to bring this fact to people's attention, because I think that we're talking about Maxwell's equations on a large number of occasions. And basically, we're always talking about these equations when they're referring to a fixed medium rather than a moving medium. And we need to look at them with a moving medium. With a moving medium, Cowling's anti-dynamo theorem doesn't follow. You can have a dynamo mechanism operating. We had a seminar in Hull University some years ago, and somebody was rabbiting on about something to get round. Oh, it was talking about a dynamo mechanism or something. And I got up and actually said this to him about, well, you've got Cowling's theorem. And there was just a deathly silence, and they moved on to the next comment. But this is the sort of thing that we're facing. It is just a typical one. And your remarks this morning about Maxwell brought it to mind to me again. And I'd thought about saying something in Bath, and all right, my memory's not what it was, so 10 seconds after I'd thought of it, I forgot about it. But this morning, I'm afraid you provoked me a little further. So, I hope you'll excuse my taking up so much time saying that, but I thought it might be of interest, maybe even of use to one or two people present. So, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for allowing me to
thank you for this clarification, but it proves that even I, who pretend to be a rather modern scientist, is still too classical in my mind. So thank you for the clarification.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Wallace.
That's quite all right. It's interesting that I was living in London at the time when Charles Thornhill was still around, and he lived only a few miles from where I was living. But I didn't find out about him until after I'd returned to Australia and found out that he had died in that period. One other thing I should say, in addition to what Jeremy said, is that there is a very readable book by Thomas E. Phipps Jr. called Old Physics for New, in which he shows that you need to take full derivatives, time derivatives, instead of partial derivatives to get at the real physics of electromagnetism. Thank you.
Great.
Anyone else?
I think you're fine that for microphone. Yeah. It's just a sort of, it's not really a question. Do you have any thoughts on Lake Maracaibo? I just had this picture suddenly of the water, you know, the smokers in the water, Lake Maracaibo, and there was another watery picture. So if we were going to make energy from, are we in the wrong place on the land? Do you know why? Are we doing it in Easter Island or on floating offshore?
I'm afraid I cannot make any sensible comment on that.
Oh, it is just
I'm not qualified to do that, sorry.
Not a question. Anybody else with something?
Could you, what was that one website, Corovito?
Yes.
Here. I didn't have my computer up fast enough to write it down, but the PAMs, it's something I'm really interested in.
Sure, I'll be happy to show it later on.
Is it
Cora Vita. There was a
Qoro?
Yes, there was initially a QU, which you normally would have, but that was already for another company, so they had to change the name.
Qorovida?
VAT, Vita of life. Vita.
I have a picture of it.
Okay, but I will happy to. I have one. I brought it so we can
Wonderful,
have
thank
a look
you.
at it if you want. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Could you allude maybe to why consciousness was put on the bottom of the pyramid, if you will, and how consciousness, can you allude to why consciousness would be at the bottom and how that would determine physics, if you will, right? Physics determines more or less chemistry, more or less determines biology. So can you allude to how consciousness would be the base of the pyramid?
Well, that's a big question, of course. It's more to make a difference where your starting points are. Physics doesn't fall out of the blue, so it's not on the basic of things that we believe it is. That's why we went to that trap of getting all the alcohol. That was one of my part of my thesis, writing about elementary particles, and I think that that's the basis of everything, and from there on we get on. But before that, there is consciousness, and I won't go into the technicalities of things, because there are different views of consciousness, but basically, to people who are a bit more advanced in consciousness, all that we see is illusion. And okay, there you come into the more tricky part. But I think if you start by consciousness from at the bottom, you will get a much more modest approach as physics. Physics isn't the basis of everything, and you don't have to explain consciousness as an epiphenomenon. Because that's where the trap is. You try to explain something which you can't.
Are they actually related? Meaning, can consciousness influence something on a physical level, or are they maybe separate things working in unison or something?
Okay, to my mind they are related, but that's a question of perception. You get here into areas where you cannot do a Sapphire project to prove it or not. But these are more philosophical concepts, and to my mind, yes.
Yeah, I think Rupert Sheldrake's work on morphic resonance and so on shows that the universe learns through us. In other words, we're kind of the middleman. What we perceive, what we learn, is available to the universe and throughout the universe. This is the aspect of the connectedness of everything in real time, which means that Fred Hoyle's problem of how do you explain life as a result of random events, he had the wrong end of the tail. It's not random. The universe has the ability to store an infinite amount of information, and it learns when we do something new that hasn't appeared anywhere else, then the universe learns that, and it's available throughout the universe. It also has meaning for where do we find life in the universe. Anywhere where the universe has learnt to produce life, it will. So when conditions changed on the Earth drastically, whole new life forms suddenly appeared. How did that happen? It's because elsewhere in the universe these conditions have been experienced and learnt from.
Right, that was why I asked, are they more interacting, if you will, or is the one at the bottom of the other? I feel more for the first version.
It's a sort of, it's a continual process. It's a process.
Yes, and I think everything is consciousness. Even an atom is consciousness. It can make it is of course a reduced consciousness. It's not our consciousness, which we have.
That's right. It's full of information.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, there's another question.
Thank you. I mean, it relates to this. I mean, I read Dean Radin's book, and the way I thought it was interesting, the sort of reaction in the room when consciousness was put from the top of the pyramid to the bottom. I interacted with him a little bit and sort of came up with the phrase consciousness chauvinism. It's almost like we privilege consciousness. We've defined ourselves as consciousness, therefore consciousness is the best thing out there.
Yes.
And it's something. Another thing that came out of the interaction was the distinction between hierarchy and holarchy. What you've displayed there, what you displayed in his book, were two hierarchies. The consciousness in some kind of pecking order, whereas earlier on you showed the distinction between things acting in a hierarchy and things interacting in a holarchy. And if you think about, another thing that came out for me from that interaction was, if you think about consciousness as part of a holarchy rather than first, second, third, fourth, fifth place in the hierarchy, you get a more integrated view of what consciousness
Yes, I
how it
agree.
interacts.
Just on that subject, if you want to see one of those, Ken Wilber does that in some of his books, rather than having it as a pyramid. He's not dealing with conscious specifically, but he has a set of concentric circles and physics in the middle. And then your hierarchy outside. So that I thought was, when I saw that, I thought that was a really great way of doing the interrelatedness of science and consciousness as a holarchy rather than a hierarchy. But I think it's a really good point.
I agree. I just took the graphs from Dean Radin's book, but I agree it should have been better to make them in circles. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's all part of the Darwinian evolutionary syndrome, where we evolved from a furry ape to what we are now, and we're sort of somehow near the pinnacle and ready to produce a theory of everything. That's complete nonsense.
Yes. I thought we were about to get to the theory of everything, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, you have to know everything.
But look, I would always put physics at the top or the bottom, whichever you want to say, because I'm a physicist. But a question has to be, suppose we have a, well, you can accept or not a evolving universe, but if we had a universe without conscious or higher conscious beings, i.e. no humans, no animals and so forth, then what we call now the laws of physics, to my mind, would, curious thing to say to my mind, but what we have as the laws of physics to me would still apply, i.e. the universe existed before we did and before any animals did, if there was evolution. Or the laws of physics are independent of us or any animal being able to think about them.
Yes, in a way, I would agree with that. It's what Wall was referring to, the theory of Sheldrake, that the universe is learning or evolving, and the laws we are seeing are evolving too. It's very difficult to say.
The laws are evolving?
Yes. They are evolving with, I mean, our physics
You mean,
laws.
yeah, sorry, well, I would say the electric force has always been the electric force.
Yes, but has it always been like this?
Has it always been like this? Yes, I would say so. Yeah.
Well, that's what you
But
say.
I don't know.
Well, and I don't either, and I think we should be modest about that.
Yes.
We
Yeah,
should be
okay.
modest. The laws we know are about maybe 10 centuries old, and I'm taking a large range. What's 10 centuries
But
old?
why have consciousness? Why have consciousness at all? Is what I'm really asking.
That I can't answer.
Why have a universe?
Why-
Indeed. Well, we're here, so we have one.
I think because consciousness is changing, it's not the same. For example, now today we can see colors just because of the way our eyes are, our structure is like there are no colors. One would say, one with another level of consciousness would say, there are no colors at all. I mean, there are no colors, but you know what I want to say? It's changing. Today we can see colors because of what we are. Maybe in the next generations we'll see different colors because there will. So there will be another level of consciousness because there will change. There will be so much change.
Why does there need to be a delineation between consciousness and physics?
Oh, well, that's the way it was depicted, and I agree it should be better to put it in circle. But just to say one word more about what Piers was saying, because I had the same thought. You know, the laws of the universe have always been there and will be the same. It's natural, I would say, almost impulse. But if you think it through, is that really true? It is an assumption, and it is a pretty hard assumption. And if you think it through, what happens if it is not true?
Well,
it won't change our universe because we are too young.
Yeah, but if it's not true, then there's a changing process from one set of rules to another. So that wholeness of the changing process is the whole process.
Yes.
It's like this idea of there's other universes around and we're like loosely connected to them. Well, hang on. If we're connected at all, then they are part of the one whole. So the multi-universe theories are, to me, are complete nonsense.
I agree. Sure, I would agree with that.
One question.
I'm conscious about that one.
Sure.
I'm delighted to see that you put consciousness at the bottom. So I'd like to ask you a question about radioactive decay.
It strikes me that where we talk about any element that's radioactive, and we've got a whole bunch of atoms which are supposedly all absolutely identical, and they've got all a decay half-life. And if we were to focus in on any one atom in that cluster, that might say, well, I'm not going yet, I'm going to wait until the very end. The neighbouring atom might say, well, I'm going to go now, or next week. Now, if all of these atoms are, in our recognition, identical, who is deciding which atom goes now or waits? And where you said earlier, I think even at an atomic level, we have consciousness.
But I said the atom has consciousness.
Yeah.
I think that's a different thing though. The problem with modern physics is that it's a statistical exercise.
Yeah.
So there is no cause and effect. In the electric universe, I suggest that there is a cause, and that cause is the neutrino. The neutrino can enter into the interactions inside the nucleus if it wants to, or if it happens to be there and of the right energy. It is sufficient to trigger the disintegration of that nucleus. And the fact that neutrinos are often found along with the products of the disintegration of the nucleus, I think that should be examined experimentally.
Thank you.
One more question.
So neutrinos are agents of change?
Yes. Yes.
Can I there's a different way of looking at this. I mean, we're talking about conscious, but I like to look at it from the point of view of mind. If you go into all of the ancient philosophies, they always talk about the mind level and the matter level. And if you think about building a house like this, say, first of all you have to take a decision, I want to build a house. And then you have to design it, and then you're constrained by the laws of physics and chemistry and material as to what you can do within this planet. And that's kind of where physical sciences come in. But without mind, you don't do anything. You don't, and so there must be a cosmic mind that works on everything, and then we each have our individual minds, and we build our lives according to how we think. And our thinking is our consciousness. So there is a part of us which is outside of the physical realm altogether. It is actually is mind. And that's what all of the ancient teachers tell us, it's what yoga teaches us, it's what real spirituality is all about, is how do you purify your mind and connect with the higher mind, the mind of God, or wisdom. So it all connects with it, and I'm not sure whether you put that at the bottom or on the top, but it's all in there.
I think it's at the top. The work of Rupert Sheldrake shows this connection, and once again we have an option of examining the possibility that the electric universe can explain it by this direct connection in real time. The cellular biologist Bruce Lipton has shown that the intelligence of a cell is at the cell wall. In other words, it's responding to its environment. And of course, on the cell wall there are these antennae, if you like, molecules which can tune into hormones and other signals in the bloodstream. But there are others, he says, which don't appear to have a function. Well, he considers them to be the external antennae. And that makes a whole lot of sense, because then the DNA is relegated to kind of the shop floor of the cell, but the signals which say, now do this, come from outside. So we are connected beyond, you know, this grey porridge up here.
That's a good example.
Yeah.
What's wrong with porridge?
I'll have porridge too.
Well,
Yes.
could I just comment on that? You see, look, that's a fantastic statement you made, Bob, but if I got a handful of marbles and stick them on a tray and shuffle them around, they're going to form hexagons, right? That's what they do, because that's how they pack together. And Birkeland currents are self-organising systems. So you see, all this great complexity in the universe will come about of its own self-organising nature and doesn't require any higher being, mind or consciousness, I suggest. Which is really boring, isn't it?
Yeah, no, at that level.
Yes.
Can I just jump in there?
Sure.
This is kind of the view that I hold to be true for the atoms being self-organizing systems, like you said. If you, as long as you shake it about, it cannot but organize in that specific way.
Right.
And that's kind of the way I look at the atoms themselves. How would that connect with your view, if you will?
Well, I would say human beings are not that self-organized.
Well,
We are looking at atoms and things like that. There you have but we have a mind which is much more evolved, and that phenomenon of being self-organized, which we see in the plasmas in the Berkeley currents, we don't see that in humanity.
Yeah, I think the self-organisation is this resonance that you get. These are resonant systems. They hold information and they like to go together in a certain way.
Well, it's not because of like or desire, they will.
No, it's because
they
of
will. I mean,
electrodynamics.
marbles will organise into hexagons.
Yeah.
They will.
The electric force combined with the matter produces these systems. But at some level, at the more complex level, these molecules and so on have their own tunes to sing, if you like.
Well, do they? But these tunes are products of the lower levels of organisation.
That's right, yeah.
Well, there you go again in the pyramid. I think we decided all it should be a circle.
Well, okay, this is your view. I mean, how do you know?
Yes. So, a question based on what Wall said. So if these self-organizing systems are self-organizing and are working based on resonance or these quote-unquote songs to sing, and humans are not inherently or currently self-organizing, is that because they're dissonant? They're not singing the frequency that they're supposed to sing? And if so, how can we harmonize ourselves? How can we bring ourselves into the right frequency?
Well, you could give us a song.
Everybody!
In a way,
I think we can't. We've lost the ability to tune in. Animals seem to be able to do it.
Right.
I think in us it's our intuition, and we don't listen to our intuition. We're sort of buried in noise. But if we learn to reconnect with our intuition, I think that's where you're connected with your higher self. It works for me anyway.
To finish this, when I came from the what was it, the other compound to here, I was walking with another student, and we were talking about scientists are pushed into their mind. We think with their mind. We can also think with our heart. It's another way of saying intuition. But
like
scientists don't like that. They want to stay in their mind. Yeah. So try.
Any last questions?
So what I feel that consciousness is a little bit different than everything else, because when you are dreaming, for example, if you would be a physicist in a dream, you can study everything what happens in the dream. But then if you come lucid, if you remember that it's a dream, you remember that you are actually the consciousness, which is the medium where the dream happens. And everything you can study is the content in that medium. So you can never find consciousness in the dream, because it's the medium where the dream happens. You can only find contents of the consciousness. But you can have a connection to that consciousness. In lucid dream you start to communicate with the mind, and you can see how the dream can be changed. And that's why Rupert Sheldrake is saying that natural laws are more like habits and not laws. Because when we are becoming more conscious, we are able to connect the medium where this reality happens. And then we are actually starting to do creation. Now we are just practicing how we unconsciously create our reality. So consciousness is, in one way, it's different. It's medium where all happens, and everything else is content in that medium.
Okay, thank you.
Good, yeah.
It's more a process than a layer or a circle. Agreed.
Lee, you had something to say.
Excuse me, if there's still time, yes. My connection is very much with the ancient world, because I lecture in ancient history. And there is, I beg your pardon. Yeah, my connection is with the ancient world and ancient history. But there are numerous examples there of the sort of thing that you're talking about, where there was a communal collectiveness to retain a consciousness. Now, we don't know what the outcome of that was. It was assumed it was for healing. But it's this notion of cymatics, that when you're doing something as a large group, you're altering the shape of things. Some say it's altering the DNA, the cellular structure of the human body. But the point is, they did it in very particular ways, and something that recurs throughout history is that sort of swastika sign that most people would call it, the Kolovrat. The Kolovrat is a circle, and it was done in several ways, communally, through a circular dance, which is still done a lot in Eastern Europe, through the use of using an amphitheatre. It was thought that the amphitheatres were used for plays or bad things like gladiatorial combat, but originally those were apparently used for something collective to happen, and it was clearly fading by the time we come through to the Greek era definitely, and by the time we got to the Romans they very much turned it into something else. But that long history is still there for us to read, should we choose to. And they also practiced it in very different ways in the megalithic era, when you have things like dolmens, and if you don't know what a dolmen is, it's basically a sloping stone at a particular angle, and it's got a gap between the sustaining stones. And in the end they were able to refine it in Eastern Europe so that the gap became a circle, because into that circle they would project consciousness at a time of a lunar maximum, and they could actually see the stone in the stone reflected the moon, and were able to, they say, commune with ancestors to gain the knowledge that Maria Gimbutas called the Neolithic Revolution. Now, whether there's any truth in that or not, there were practitioners, there is evidence there to be seen, and I just wondered if that's something that you had come across in your delving into consciousness, going into those ancient examples. Sorry that took so long.
I must say I don't have any personal experience in that. I fully understand what you're saying and I agree with that, but I have no personal experience in that.